Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. To me, one of the biggest lessons was that he learned to be content. He learned the power of contentment, to be happy when he has a lot of things and to be okay when he has nothing. I mean, go back to coaching. I feel like that's a lesson we have to have is contentment, because to be happy when everything's going well in your program, that's not special. That's pretty easy. But to feel good about the direction, to feel good about your calling when things are going really wrong in your program, that's where contentment comes in. And you know my story where where things really fell apart was when my identity was wrapped up in something. And I think that's the danger for us even still, right?
It is. And like, I mean, but no, I mean, I like, you look at me and I'll give you a perfect example, man. I was the hot young coach in the country. I was at St. John's rolling, and then I got fired because I interviewed at Arizona State. You don't know the story, but
no,
I was the hot young coach, Manhattan, St. John's, turned St. John's around. I had the year off, and that's how I ended up in New Mexico, because I had like 6 or 7. All my athletic director friends knew I got what everybody thinks was a raw deal. I got fired because I was disloyal at St. John's. They thought, well, we hired you from little old Manhattan College. You're in the Big East, and you're interviewing for other jobs, even though I had permission. Yes. And so I end up at New Mexico replacing Coach Bliss. I was not a good fit out there. I have some good friends out there, but I went from New York City to Albuquerque.
Different.
I was in witness protection. You know, my mom said, "Do I need a passport?" And I said, "No, Mom, it's New Mexico." But that was just God's way of saying, look, you got a different plan for you, bro. And I didn't know what the plan was, but the plan was ultimately go back to Dallas, raise 2 boys, 2 great young sons. I've been married 35 years. I've had a second career in basketball. I probably extended my life, hopefully, expectancy, because I left coaching. And and I was a good coach. I was, Matt. I mean that. I'm not just saying that. And I wasn't a great coach, but I was a good coach. But my point is, none of that stuff matters. Like, I've had an incredible life around the game of basketball, both as a coach and now as a broadcaster. And God pointed me in a different direction and said, you know what? You've done what you did. You were good. I got some other things for you now. Be a great father, be a great husband, be a mentor to young coaches. And so there's that contentment of knowing, like, Bill Self, Tom Izzo, these are good friends of mine. Tom Crean, Shaka Smart. Could I have coached against them? Yeah, I coached. I have a winning record against. I don't know if I have a winning record, but I do not have a losing record against Boeheim and Calhoun.
Not many guys can say that,
right? But my point is, it does not matter.
Right.
I loved what I did. I loved the relationships. Now my relationships are in what I do as a broadcaster and going around and talking to young coaches, doing clinics, giving people ask me for advice, helping them on Twitter with plays that might win a game this season, and sharing my faith, because I could easily be bitter about the way my early part of my career ended. And I thought I was going back to coaching, obviously, after New Mexico. I had after I left New Mexico, 20 coaching opportunities. And I said, you know what? Don't mess with happy. You're at ESPN. You live in Dallas. Your wife's family is close by. Park Cities is a cool place, and my boys had a great experience. And so anyway, it gets back to contentment, and wouldn't change a thing. God had a plan, and I'm all on board with the plan.
And what a cool story right there, because no doubt you were a great coach and could have done it for 40 years. If you would have done it for 40 years, you would have affected a lot of lives, because like every team that those players, the families that they had. So obviously there would have been a lot of lives. I don't think it compares though to the amount of lives and people you've been able to affect with your current role. So to your point, well, I mean, because golly, think about it. You're doing, I would imagine, more now with more people than some of the guys. Because when you are a head coach at a college or a high school, there's a large amount of time that has to be just poured into that small group of people.
Yeah. No, you're
everywhere. And I'll tell you, I mean, one of my favorite commentators, not just because I know you, but I feel like I'm learning the game, watching the game. And that's because of you. Way different than just a play-by-play or even a former, I hate to say it, a former player sometimes that's on there. I get more from so Coach, just to validate what you already said, no doubt you can see a hand through everything that's happened with you.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. And I love teaching. And so even on a broadcast, I get back to what I said about learning something new about the game every week. And when I do, and I go, I could fit that into a broadcast. Like, I can talk about that short roll. What's a short roll? We didn't know what a short roll was 25 years ago, but now when you trap a pick and roll, that big guy doesn't have a chance to run to the rim, and you can't find him. You got to kind of hit that little pocket pass play. And so, okay, now what's a short roll? So I explain it. I don't want someone to think a short roll is something that's on your dinner table at night, And so that's what I love about my role now is I love teaching the game, and I take myself not seriously. I realize this is not the most important thing going on in the world, but it's in the playground of life. And if now, I think even later on in my broadcasting career, if people can realize that I'm a Christian too, and that because I really try to kill people with kindness. I've used that phrase forever, but there's a difference between killing people with kindness and also knowing that kindness comes from your faith, and that it's not just, oh, he's a nice guy. He's someone that walks his walk because he's a believer. And I think that's important for young coaches too. I know I keep talking about young coaches, but at the end of the day, no one is going to care about how many wins. Like, I joke with my buddy Mick Cronin out at UCLA. I always say, when we die and go to heaven, St. Peter's going to say, "Listen, it's nice here, but it's not Westwood, okay? It's not UCLA's campus. It's nice, but but at the end of the day, like, I just want to make sure that I've checked all my boxes and that everything's in order, so that when God calls me home, He says, "Hey, you weren't perfect. None of us are, but you were a person of faith, and you shared your faith, and you did it in a way because of this stupid little orange leather basketball that has been around my life for 50 years." So it's cool.
I think some of us can pursue winning, but to the point of where it's the only part we're pursuing is a certain amount of wins, a certain amount of whatever that comes from that. And I don't think we should never be ashamed, believer, non-believer, as a coach, as a player, never be ashamed of pursuing excellence with our team, excellence with our practice, our craft. But then I think of my high school coach. I played for the legendary Tommy Thomas at the Colony.
Oh, you sure did.
And after I graduated, we had a good team. Darren Williams and Bracey Wright were sophomores. Their next 2 years, they won a ton of games. They made it to state. And then after they left, a couple hard years there, a couple lean years that every coach knows that's going to come, it's going to happen. And he got out, to help Darren and do some different things. And now he's having an awesome life at this point. But I remembered at the time thinking that, like, Coach T, his legacy, the amount of wins, his success, that's it. But then 3 or 4 years after, in the DFW area, Dallas-Fort Worth area, it didn't matter.
Right.
Like, the wins he had, the success. But you know what does last is the fact that out of anybody in my life outside of my immediate family who calls me or texts me the most, it's him.
Yeah.
Like, that relationship that he has and that he's been able to keep with players. So to your point, I think the danger, I don't care if you keep talking about new coach, I think I'm mid at 16 years. I think I'm mid, or even older coaches. What are we pursuing? Like, what are we actually doing this for? While also trying to maintain a level of excellence that usually does lead to winning, right?
Yeah. And see, I always say this: 5 of the 10 best, and I might be off by 1 or 2, but 5 of the 10 best 5 of the 10 best coaches I've ever been around in my life were high school coaches. I'm talking about guys that could coach the pants off of anybody in the Big Ten or Big 12, but they happen to be in New Jersey or Indiana or Texas. And when I watch coaches, I don't necessarily think of wins and losses. I think of this guy takes his material and gets the most out of it. And I know that it's a cliche to say that, but that's really coaching, because we all know that if you have great talent, you can be a lousy coach or a yeller and a screamer, and your talent is such that you can't screw them up. What I've always admired is guys who could take what they had. You know, we always said this is a Bear Bryant ism, okay? He can take yours and beat his and take his and beat yours. You know, there's a bell curve of coaching. Like I can Bob McKillop or maybe Rick Pitino. There's only a handful of guys in college coaching that could, it wouldn't matter what talent you give them, they're going to figure out a way to win. And, you know, that's the ultimate in coaching. The most of us are in the middle of the bell curve. And so you can't really get wrapped up too much on your wins and losses, because most of us are really the product of our talent, you know, and who walks into your high school that given year, you know. And again, self-awareness. You can only do what you can do the best you can do it, and be a good leader, be a good teacher, and hope that you do have enough talent that you can have success. But I've watched coaches who finish 500 and say that guy's a great coach. And you know, Joe Scott at Air Force Academy. I'm out here, you know, in Colorado Springs. That guy's a great coach. He's running the Princeton stuff better than anybody. And I've talked to him a million times. I know he's a great coach. I think they finished like a couple games over 500 last year, maybe 16 and 14. I'm just guessing. They're hard to play against. They hate playing against him in the Mountain West. But he's also got academy guys. He's got, you know, he's got a lot of Dallas kids, by the way, because of, you know, the military thing. And Texas is a great place for the academies, you know.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, he's a great coach. It doesn't matter what his record is. And, you know, there's other guys. Bill Self's a great coach, and he's going to win national championships. He's a great coach. I don't care what talent you give him. He's going to win. But if you're wrapped up in your record and the glory of coaching and winning titles, it's going to be very short-sighted in the end, Matt. It really will be. I can tell you that firsthand, because I haven't thought a second about what my coaching record was in 9 years. I do know I went to 8 postseasons in 9 years. And that's when people say, how come you're not coaching? How come you stopped coaching? You know what? It was just a calling. It was like, hey, I gave you a chance. The good Lord said, I gave you a chance to be a head coach, and you were good at it. Now I want you to do this other stuff.
Yeah.
And then, you know, my friends who can't give up coaching, I can't speak for them, but I know I could do it easily and look back on it and say, I love what I did. Now I'm still in basketball, and I'm able to impact people here with broadcasting.
I love the idea of trying to measure success of a season beyond wins and losses. And I wrote down this word while kind of where you were talking about it's potential. Yes. Potential. It's a horrible word, except if you meet it or you exceed it, then it's great.
Well, it's like culture. You know, culture is a neutral term. Okay. It's not, culture doesn't mean it's good culture or bad culture. Every team has culture. I walk into a gym. Here's a good one for you. I say this all the time at clinics. I ought to be able to walk into your gym at any 10 minutes of practice, beginning with your warm-ups. Remember, don't get bored if you're getting better, middle or end, and know what the culture of your program is. So when I say culture, we say potential. Potential is a neutral word. Doesn't mean that you reached it or didn't reach it. It just means, you know, ultimately the potential to me is, did we get the very most out of our team in that given season? And individually, did we get the very most out of each young man or young lady on the team? And that's meeting your potential or exceeding it sometimes. You know, sometimes potential is exceeded because your culture is so good that your players are so close that they take each other up beyond what we all thought could happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you have that happen in a given year, which doesn't happen often, it's that special season where everything just clicked. But yeah, I mean, you can only do the best you have with the material you have. And that's how I judge coaches, because I know it's beyond winning and losing, you know?
Coach, I love to play a little game. these other coaches don't know that I'm playing this game in my head, but when I go to a clinic, and again, TABC is just the biggest one down here, but when I go and I see guys that I either have a close relationship with or barely one, but as coaches, when you step foot in that fraternity, whether you stay in it or step out, whatever, you're in it, and you're always in it. And so I always ask them, how was your year? Coach, I just can tell so much from the response.
I know.
Well, we just, golly, guys just didn't do the. Okay, got it. I understand what you're basing this on. I feel like with some certain confidence that no matter what year I had, when somebody asked me, if I feel like with culture, with expectations, with managing players, with being process-based, Coach, I can answer that question almost the same way every time, which is, man, first of all, love coaching these guys. We had such a special gym. They cared about each other, and they played really hard.
Yeah.
That to me has nothing to do with, man, we made it to the regional finals. Man, we won 2 games this year. Because, like your point, Tom Inman. Do you know who Tom Inman is, Coach?
Yeah.
Plano Senior High.
Yeah. I'm out of Dallas for a few years now.
Oh no, but he's here somewhere, and wherever he is right now,
John Roberson.
He's talking. That's right. He's talking to people.
Is still playing. John
is he really? Playing.
He's like 30 something, still high level Euro player.
Oh wow, good for him. Those guys that keep that going and make that.
Let me just tell you what you just said.
Yeah,
what you just said about your team had nothing to do with wins and losses.
Yeah.
You were pleased. Now, if you had enough talent, you won your 20. You went 20-5 and lost in the district final. If you didn't have enough talent, the same things were true about the togetherness, and they worked hard, and you were 15-11 because you didn't have quite the talent you had maybe in another year.
Yeah.
To me, that's coaching. Like, I don't need to know what your win-loss record was. Now, if I can tell that your team's not well coached, I can probably see it for myself, but I'm not going to judge you on your record just because of your record. It's going to be what I see on the court in games and in practice. And, that takes the self-awareness of a coach to say, I know I did a good job with these kids because we got maybe the record didn't indicate this was as good a season as last year, but man, we had more talent last year, but we got closer to our potential this year than we did last year. Got to know that intrinsically. It's got to, and if you don't, it gets back to what I said earlier. If you don't know what the end result looks like, Matt, you can't really answer that question for yourself. A good coach knows what the end result looks like at the end of a season, end of a practice, end of a game. Obviously, the scoreboard tells you whether the result was good externally. But yourself at the end of a year, man, you know what? We got a lot out of these guys. We couldn't ask anymore. They gave us everything they did in practice that we asked them. They competed in games, and we were in a district that was hard.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, what are we talking about here?
So Coach Inman, we're down in Austin at one of the state tournaments, and I see him out, and this was years ago when I was still at McKinney with Wes, and I said, Coach, man, you won state a few years ago. I was just so enamored with that. Like, in UIL down here, it's 7 rounds to do it. 7 in taps where I am. It's only 5. Like, I got a way better shot, Coach. If I can get in, I got a shot. But it's such a beating, 7 games. And I said, how'd you do that, Coach? He goes, man, at the end of the day, we're just jockeys. The best horses win. And it didn't really sink in at that moment because a good jockey can take a bad horse and make it better.
Yeah.
A good jockey with great horses, man, they can do that. But then to his point too, and you've said it a bunch, we all know there is a little bit of magic that has to happen for it really to work out the way that you all want, which is got to have the talent. It's got to be the right plan for that talent. Obviously, coaches have to manage that talent the right way because there's a lot of there's coaches around our teams around here with a lot of talent that if the plan doesn't work and the culture's not the way you want, and then there's this other thing that is out there, that injuries. Golly, how many times, how many seasons do you think like we've got the pieces? In my head, I'm thinking we've got the pieces. the plan works with these guys, and then 2 or 3 pieces throughout the year go down. And then so when you look back over it, and I have this grandparent that we always go eat after the season, and he flat out asked me, he's like, Coach, what happened? How come it didn't happen? And I was almost taken aback, like, do you really not know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm convinced. I don't think parents don't know. People don't know that you can't lose top 1, 2, and 3 for extended periods of time and just think next man up, especially at the high school level, but even the college level.
You know what's never talked about in coaching, and when people criticize coaches, and they never talk about fate and luck. Okay, it's never brought up. It's always your team was good. Yeah, you had some injuries, but you either won or you lost, or yeah, you overachieved a little bit. And yeah, it's unfortunate you had some guys hurt. But fate and luck are a big part of success. And sometimes, I'm going to say it, sometimes an average coach is in the right place at the right time, and sometimes a great coach is in the wrong place at the wrong time because of injuries or whatever. Or, let's face it, we're all human beings. Like a bad call in a district game. You know what I mean? You're in TAPS playoffs, and referees are human. They miss a call. It cost you the game. They misinterpreted a rule or didn't see a foul call late in the game. It happens every season, all the time, every week, every night. And that one game, I'll never forget. I can't remember who it was, but NFL coach. They're 7-8. He's on the hot seat, and the word is if they don't finish 500, he's going to get fired. And I think they were playing the Jets because I'm a Jets fan, and they're down on the goal line. They're driving late, and they're about to take the lead. And this guy's going to finish 8-8, and his guy fumbles on the 2-yard line, and he gets fired. And maybe the next year everything goes well, and they're 13-3, and they go to the Super Bowl. We'll never know that because of one play. And that one play oftentimes will characterize a coach's career. And I don't think that's fair, because that's why I say fate and luck intervene more than people know. Is Bill Self a great coach? Yes, he is. Does every now and then Bill Self get lucky and something happens and you go, freaking Bill Self.
With better players, do you seem to get luckier more than
you do. And again, like that's why I don't ever judge, and I'll tell you this really quick story, but there were 3 high school students in the 60s in Seattle. And there was this new thing. It was a monstrosity, but it was called a computer. And this one high school in suburban Seattle it was the only high school in the country that had a computer. And the computers were new. And there were 3 students at the high school that morning, noon, and night, spring, summer, fall, winter, whenever they weren't in class, they were on the computer. One of them, and they were all best friends. One of them was a hiker, and he went on a trip with his family, and I can't remember his name now, and I'm so sorry about that. But he was tragically killed in a hiking accident. And there were only like 20 hiking deaths a year in the United States at that time, whatever. Well, he was no longer around, tragically. The other 2 guys happened to be Paul Allen and Bill Gates. And the rest is history. And fate intervenes. And again, if it's God's will, then it's God's will. But that's why, in sports, luck is part of the equation. It's not just how good a coach you are, how poor a coach. Sometimes things happen that are out of your control, and you're measured by it.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.